everyone. How's everyone doing? I hope everybody's having a great day. Welcome to the speaker series with Rory Rowland. It's coaching skills for winning managers. And Rory's got a lot to talk about today. So I'm going to introduce him real quick with his bio, and then I'm going to let him take it away. He probably has some instructions for you. And like he said, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to, chat on the chat, and he will answer any questions for you as well. So. All right, so we'll get started here. Rory Rowland is a business consultant, seminar leader, and author specializing in programs that help organizations improve their leadership and communication skills. After serving as president of two credit unions, Rory began using his communication skills and specialized background to help others become more effective. Rory has presented high energy, fun, and humorous programs in all 50 states, Canada, Mexico, Italy, the Virgin Islands, and Guam for the last 25 years, and is continually one of the most highly rated speakers at associations throughout the country. And we've had Rory speak several times, so I can tell you, we love having Rory here. So Rory, everyone, welcome Rory to present to us today.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And it's great to be here today. I love talking about this topic. This is actually my favorite topic to talk about, is the power of coaching. I've just literally focused my entire career, the last 10 years, really focusing on coaching and how it works and how to go about it. So I am delighted that you're here. I hope you can see the screen here. And one of the question is, what is coaching? So I actually, what I do for a living now is actually teach leadership teams and their entire organization coaching skills, particularly if I do sales training for the frontline folks, that I coach the management team all the way from the CEO to frontline managers how to coach, because I've discovered that if you don't have coaching skills, you can't do the sales skills. It won't work. And so you can see right here that I've actually got a question on the screen. And, what is your perception of coaching? And then what is your favorite definition of coaching? Who was in team one? I think that was in Eric's group, but he wasn't going to be the leader in that one. So who wants
I'm
to
actually going to be. We had some communication malfunctions, I guess, so to speak.
Do you want me to skip your group then, Eric?
No, we're good.
Okay, fire away. What did you guys pick as your favorite one through 6?
Number 1 was the choice of our group.
Okay.
All of them could probably pertain to any portion of whatever situation you're in as a coach, but number 1 kind of brought it all together, I think.
You like the idea of the partnership.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very good. And did anybody share their perception of coaching? What do they think it means, or things like that?
Really get into that too much. So.
Okay, that is perfectly good. Okay, the next group, group 2, what did you have there?
I didn't look at the numbers.
So group 2, we had 3 of the 4 of us picked number 4, the John Whitmore and Coaching for Performance, and one person picked number 5, the Work Foundation.
Okay, very good. So most of you picked 4. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Group 3, what was your favorite one?
Maybe that was our group, Jeff. I'm not sure. We cannot remember what group number we were.
That's okay. We'll just we'll get from your group and away we go.
Jody, we were number 3.
Are we number 3? Okay. Number 2 is the one that we picked.
Okay.
We were just starting to talk about other definitions when we were taken out of the room back into
the group. I understand. Very good. Okay. Next group.
Hi, group number 4. We picked number 4, John Whitmore in Coaching for Performance.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. And group 5.
I'm thinking group 5 might have been us. I did not check the group number, so I apologize. But we actually went with kind of a combination of 2, 3, and 4. We liked the promoting towards the organizational objectives, allowing the employee to kind of own the experience and for us to facilitate it. So we kind of lean towards a combination of 2, 3, and 4.
Excellent. Love it, love it, love it. Very, very good. And did we have one more? Did we have 6 groups, Sarah Beth, or just 5?
I'm going to guess we had 6 because that would have been me, Morgan, and Rachel. And we had Angie in our group as well, and we liked number 1.
Okay. Very good. So you liked, so it was some people picked number 1. A couple of groups picked a combination of 2, 3, and 4. Number 4. And I got to tell you, I'm going to tell you my favorite, even though it wasn't the favorite of everybody, is I like number 4, John Whitmore, Coaching for Performance. And the reason I like that one is he wrote a great book called Coaching for Performance. And coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. It's helping them to learn rather than to teach them. And that's my favorite. It's simple. We can remember it, and just helping people to know where they're going. So that, I just love that one right there. So I'm going to share my screen here and make sure that we've got the right one up and running. And so that was the perception of coaching. And we're going to talk here about a little bit about the Johnsonville Brat story. I love this story right here because Ralph Steyer wrote in 1990 in the Harvard Business Review, how I learned to help my employees lead, or how to help my team lead. And he said what worried him more about the competition was the gap between potential and performance. And I think this is a really important key. If you want to close that gap, I have not found any tool more effective on helping your teams perform at a highest level than actually the gap between potential and performance. And I think that's a very, very important key. And he was big on coaching to do that. So what is the potential gap? And a lot of times if we had more time, I would break you out into breakout groups on this one. And, what is your perception of how people manifest themselves in the workplace on average? And I will tell you what I typically get is between 50 to 75%, meaning that most team leaders think that their team performs at about 50%, maybe a 75% level. But what I have seen, if you do coaching effectively and really talk about this on a consistent basis, you can move your team to 80 to 90%. I've had clients that I do a lot of consulting with credit unions, and I've worked with them over a 3-year period of time and actually moved them where they were performing on loan growth at 3 times the national average. So this can be an incredibly powerful tool so that you can have a greater impact in your career and the career of the folks that you work with. So I love the potential gap idea. So, and I typically ask people, what are their fears of coaching? And a lot of it is getting it wrong, not doing the right thing. But on my podcast recently, I've got a podcast called Coaching for Potential. And just recently, I believe it was episode 119, I interviewed a guy who wrote a book called The 4 Greatest Coaching Conversations. He's from Sydney, Australia. His name is Jerry Connor. And he's a remarkable guy, and he wrote a great book. And he had about 200 coaches that worked for him nationwide or worldwide. What they did is they took all of their coaching, about 10,000 coaching journals from coaches, and they asked them, what is most important? Is it the right question or the right time? And I want to alleviate one of your fears of coaching here is to say, you don't have to have the right question. It's more important the time of the question. I'll give you an example of this. I had a client last week. They had an employee that was a little frustrated. The manager walked into the employee, said, what's going on? She said, I'm frustrated. I've got too much work. Another employee overheard that and says, hey, I've got some time. I can help you, and really resolve that issue by simply asking the question there of that. So I think that's an important key of dealing with it, is how to overcome people's fears of coaching. And I love this quote right here. The underlying intent of every coaching interaction is to build self-belief in the person that you're coaching. And so you truly want people to leave with a stronger feeling of themselves. And I'll give you an example of this. I love this story out of John Whitmore's book. It's actually on page 42 of the 4th edition. And I would highly recommend, if you want to get better at coaching, I would get John Whitmore's book. You can buy it on Amazon for about $4 used, maybe $6 used, and a little shipping. I call it the Bible of coaching. He was so successful, he was actually knighted by the Queen for writing this book. It's truly my favorite coaching book. It's absolutely fantastic. But on page 42, he talks about a really important concept. And what they were doing is they had actually were having people teach tennis. There was a gentleman named Timothy Gallwey who wrote a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. And he was actually the one who kind of discovered this kind of communication style. John Whitmore and Timothy Gallwey partnered, and they were teaching people the inner game of tennis. But one weekend they had overscheduled and they didn't have enough coaches. And so they actually asked ski instructors to be a tennis coach, which seems absurd, doesn't it? How can someone teach that is a ski instructor, a snow ski instructor, teach someone to improve their tennis game? But when I tell you this story, you'll illustrate the point. And this is one of my favorite stories of coaching. So what they did is they took the ski instructor, they knew how to use the model that I'm talking about today, and they had them go on the court. They gave them a racket. They said, do not hit a ball, okay? Use the racket, but do not hit the ball. So that goes on the court, puts the racket down, says, okay, player A and player B, we're going to have you coach back and forth. So they do. Or they're going to have them play back and forth, and he says, I'm your coach for the next hour. So they did that. And while they're volleying back and forth, player B hits it out of bounds. And so the coach says, time out, let's talk about that. And so they brought them together and said, the coach says, what happened? And of course, player B, with about as much snarkiness as he can get away with, says, I was late on the ball and it went out of bounds. Duh, coach. You probably wouldn't say the duh, but maybe a little bit of an attitude there. The coach says, okay, tell me what led up to it. And the coach says, and then he says, well, the ball had topspin. I didn't see the topspin, and therefore I was late on the ball because it actually bounced lower and faster than I anticipated. Excellent. Do you know what to look for in topspin? The coach says, or the player B says no. So the coach with his best poker face says to player A, can you demonstrate to player B how to hit a topspin? Because he has no idea how to do it. He has no idea how to do this. So he does, what he does is actually says, yeah, you take your racket and you go over the ball like this. When you do that, it gives it a topspin and it gives it a centrifugal force. So when it hits the ground, it bounces lower and faster. So the coach says to player A, okay, what are you going to do? And or player B, I believe in my example here. What are you going to do with the ball comes over and it's got a topspin? It says, I'm going to be quicker and faster on it. Excellent. Let's go back and play. Player A, please hit a topspin again. So they go back and play. Player B or player A hits a topspin. Player B hits it back perfectly to the coach or perfectly back to player A. So the coach says, time out. Now it's time to love them up. You got to give them that encouragement, that positive motivation, that thing they did it right. So he says, great. So what did you do differently? He says, I noticed the ball had topspin immediately. I knew it was going to bounce lower and faster. I came around quicker. I hit it back to my opponent. The coach says, excellent, fantastic, great job. He says, now let's think about it for a moment. Now he's going to talk about the strategy of the game, even though he knows nothing about strategy. He's going to say, you hit it back to your opponent. If you could hit it anywhere on the court, where would you like to hit it? And the player thinks for a moment, well, I'd like to hit it away from my opponent. Okay, give me some thoughts on that. If I hit it away from my opponent, they've got to run back and forth. If they have to run back and forth all afternoon, by the end of the session, they may, in fact, the end of the game, they may, in fact, be tired. And as the great Vince Lombardi said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. And I love that quote because it truly is absolutely true. So if you can make that fatigue. So what I want you to do is, so you don't embarrass anybody, just text me, what did that coach do? What was the skill that coach do? So just text me privately what that coach did. And so just text me privately. What was the communication tool that coach used? And I'm having a little trouble with the marker here. I don't know if I'm trying to see if I can I read the text or can you read them, Sarah Beth?
If they send them directly to you, you should be the only one that can read them.
Okay. And it's not coming through, so I don't see them coming in. let's see. And I don't see the chat option here. Okay. I'm going to make it easy for you. He used the power of questions. His entire communication tool was just asking questions. I'm actually in the process of writing a book right now because I've been working with new managers and they get frustrated. They go, what is this coaching thing? And I'm writing a book called The Question is the Answer. And because they've just got to have the questions to, you just got to remember, ask the question. And it's not the importance of the question, but it's the timing. Are you asking the question the right time? But if you ask questions and tell people, I believe in you and you're better at this, and look at this coach here. This coach really helped improve that tennis player's game because he left that tennis player feeling better about themselves. Notice how much they improved, but they improved by not hold the racket this way, not telling them what to do, truly asking them questions. Remember the power of questions. They're incredibly important. So on the next slide, we've got the positive psychology of the inner game. And what this does is it allows you to really use this tool, and so that you can, so that you can use this tool to help examine values, develop vision, goal setting. It's a great tool for that. It's also a great tool for centering and maintaining focus. And it's just a great tool for doing that. So if there's one skill I would highly encourage you to improve your skill set on, is truly the power of coaching. And I just think it's such an incredibly powerful tool. So in the inner game of tennis, Timothy Galloway talks about an incredibly important concept. And I'm going to go back to the next slide to see if I've got it on there. Okay. But on the inner game of tennis, what he discovered was a very, very important concept. And if you've got a notepad, you can actually take notes on this, but it's self one and self two. What he discovered is there's basically two conversations going on in your head when you're having when you're working on a project. If you're playing tennis or if you're playing golf or whatever it is, you've got two voices in your head. Self one is that inner critic. Self two is the part of you that actually does the process. If you've ever heard a professional athlete and they say, you just won the 7th game of the World Series, you just hit a grand slam, a walk-off grand slam to win the 7th game of the World Series. And I believe, if I'm correct, Joe Morgan did that. He did with the Toronto Blue Jays. It might have been in the 7th game World Series. And I actually was on a plane with him, if I've got the name right, and he actually talked about that moment, that he was just in the zone when he did that. And so what we discover is self one is that critical self. Self two is that person or that part of you that gives you that sense of flow, that sense of gliding, that sense of effortlessness. And so in order to perform at a highest level, you want people to be in that self two, that zone perspective. So how do we ask questions to get them in zone two? Notice the coach didn't ask any questions that were critical of the player, just said, what was your perception? What did you think? What happened here? But an even a better way to do that is to ask questions that don't force them to even think about self one. And I'll give you an example of this in baseball. If any of you coach baseball or have worked with baseball, that actually what they've done there is they've actually put numbers in colors on the baseball. So rather than saying to the player, are you watching the ball? They ask the question, what was the color and the number of the ball that they just pitched to you? That way, it's not a question of you watching the ball. And because when you say, are you watching the ball? That kind of highlights that inner critic. It allows that inner critic to kind of be alert. Yeah, of course I was watching the ball, coach. But when you ask another question about what was the color or the number, they have to think back about that experience, and they're not thinking about, did I watch the ball? They're really focusing so intently on the color and the number that they see the ball so clearly that it actually helps them improve their batting averages. And so they use that in teams in order to change how people communicate. And I think that's just an absolutely great example of that. I'll give you some other examples of that too. In the homework that I gave you that had the coaching definitions, behind that are actually some coaching questions that you can use. But there's tons of coaching questions on the internet. So it's a great way to go about it. So this is a great point here about Timothy Galloway's Inner Game of Tennis. The first point is, do you have to have technical knowledge and at the area of which you are going to coach? And the answer absolutely is no, which I bet many of you, the very first day I was taught this concept, I thought you always had to be an expert. You had to be that person that knew everything about it. And that is not the case. However, what you want to do with coaching is on the next bullet point. You want to build awareness, responsibility, and self-belief. Because when you build awareness, responsibility, and self-belief, you change the perspective. I'll give you an example of this. I had a client last week. She's a branch manager of a credit union in Indiana. And they were going to open up their branches, and the CEO was going to come by and visit the branches. Excuse me just a second. Going to visit the branches. And she asked them to be on the best behavior. The CEO's coming over. Anyway, they weren't on their best behavior. So what she wanted to do was find out, would they do some self-awareness and take on responsibility for their behavior? So at the end of the day, she said, could you do me a favor for homework tomorrow? Would you rate your scale on a number of 1 to 10, 10 being an absolutely perfect team player and really helping, or 1 not being a perfect team player? And she said, then how would we rate the team? And have that number between 1 and 10. She said the next day they came back much more somber and ready to work. She never did ask them what their numbers were, but she wanted them to build self-awareness and a sense of responsibility, and they did change their sense of responsibility. So that was just an incredible key. Now, this is a very important point with coaching. We must see people in terms of their potential and not their performance. You want to see people in terms of their potential and their performance, because here's the key. I was coaching some managers last week, and they were incredibly frustrated with this person who worked in their branch, and he wasn't working up to his potential. And so they got incredibly frustrated, and they wanted to lash out at him. So they called me and said, how do I coach this? And there's 2 important keys on coaching for performance, or coaching for potential rather than performance. Pardon me. One of the things you want to lead with before you start talking about performance, you want to lead with, do you know the hopes, wishes, dreams, and aspirations of your employee? So you want to make sure that you know the hopes, wishes, dreams, and aspirations of your employee. If you don't know that, you're not going to be as good as a coach as you would like. So the first thing you want to, when you're talking with someone, when you're having a performance issue, is what's your goals in the organization? What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to go? For Eric, it might be a scenario where he's got a person that they want to improve their sales, but they're not doing as much outbound calling or marketing or whatever they need to do to get better at it. So he could say, what's your goals? What do you want to accomplish? What's your hopes, wishes, dreams, and aspirations? Then you start from, okay, is this behavior getting you there? And then what do we need to do to get you there? How can I help you? What is your game plan? Let's rewrite your goals, whatever. See, you go from a very broad perspective of what are your hopes, wishes, dreams, and aspirations, then narrow down to the specific behavior that you want to improve. And that's an important key of how to coach more effectively. And I love that tool there because it's just so important for us to do a better job as coaches. Now, coaching requires expertise in coaching, but not in the subject at hand. And that is such an important concept in this process. Also, as a manager, we must be experienced as a support and not a threat. I'm going to give you an example of this. I was working with a senior VP of the HR department and also the COO of a very, very large credit union I was working with. They have about 300 employees. And they always thought about when they walked into an office, they just felt like, oh my God, nobody wants to see us. They're always concerned about what's going on. And so I said, you ever write thank you notes to people or just quick notes of saying so I always tell managers, talk about success stories. I hate organizations that have an employee of the month, but always talk about the success stories. And that's a great way to teach sales training is give me a success story and then ask the group, how can we make that better? That's a whole nother project. but now you see that you're being experienced as a support and not a threat. In order to be an effective coach, they've got to see you as a support. Here's the most important aspect of being seen as a coach. I call it coach like a mother. And the reason I say that, we've all had our moms tell us, or the people that are in charge of us, if you don't have a mom, but those people who are in charge of us that raised us, cared so much about us, they told us things we didn't want to hear. And so I'll actually, what I'll have you do, if I can get my screen here to be bigger. I want to see everybody here, but I'm going to put everybody on widescreen here. But just wave at me if you've had a mother tell you something you didn't want to hear. Just wave at me so I can get a sense of that. So now, Eric, that was a weak wave. Come on, Eric, give me a wave, buddy. Give me a wave. There you go. Absolutely, my friend. But we've all had that. And the reason we know that, I love that, Danielle. Danielle keeps waving. I love that, Danielle. Wonderful. I love it. If I were in the room, I would star you up. Now she's embarrassed and she's covered it up. Don't do that, Danielle. But the key is you want to be a support and not a threat. Moms are support. You know that they're telling you out of a sense of love. The same thing for us when we're working with employees. We want to make sure that we tell them out of a sense of love that we're doing this, that you want to see them be successful. And that's the important part of this process, is you want to be seen as a support and not a threat. And then I love this quote right here. Even though we don't really know what the issue is, we're quite sure we've got the answer they need. And that's just the arrogance of leadership. We want to make sure that we're not arrogant leaders. We want to make sure that we step back from that. So I think that's an important key. So I'm actually, just for a second here, I'm going to put you in, Sarah Beth, can we put people in breakout rooms again? And here's the question. Or am I the person who needs to do that, Sarah Beth? What's the...
Yeah, I still don't have the controls.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can make you a dual control person and see if I can do that. Yep, I can do that. So you should be able to control it now, I hope. Is that it?
You gave me permission to control your PowerPoint, but I still don't have breakout rooms.
Okay. That's okay. I'll do them. But here's the question. What I want you to do in your breakout room is, how are ways we can be a support in coaching? So group one, what was one or two ideas on how to be a support? Anybody?
Hi, Rory. It's Michaeline. And we had several things. Do you want us to give
Yeah, give me two or three.
Well, one of them is being a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is positive feedback, giving positive feedback.
Right.
And then another one was, instead of dwelling on what went wrong, learn from it and go on from there.
Yep. Don't focus on the problem, focus on the solution.
Correct.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Group two, what were a couple of things that you mentioned?
So in group two, we talked about, when you're coaching, to relive their successes and use that to help them move forward.
Right.
Come from a place of love and have honest conversation. Be curious, actively listen, and find out what their goals are, their dreams are, and then provide time for one-on-one coaching opposed to team coaching, so that you're able to be a little bit more free in your thoughts.
Excellent. Love it. Yeah. And I love, the honesty, and the curiosity. Great job. Well done. Okay. Group three, what did you come up with?
Some of the things already mentioned. We also had talked about using open-ended questions to prompt answers. I identify with the person and share personal experiences, some one-on-one back and forth, and just simply asking the question, to the individual, what do you need?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. And I'm actually going to do a Mr. Rogers quote here. I watched Mr. Rogers here about a month ago, the movie about him, and I highly recommend it. But the great thing about him is he had a quote in there and he says, once you learn somebody's life story, it's hard not to love them. And I thought, what an incredibly powerful concept. So if we truly listen with curiosity and care and concern and really make that connection, we really, you do, there's a sense of love that you get, this respect for them and the challenges they face, the issues they face. So I love what you said there. That's so important. So open-ended questions, personal experience, ask them about their life. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Group 4, what did you have?
We talked a lot about the importance to communicate, to stay positive, to be truly interested in the other individual you're talking to or coaching or working with.
Right.
I once had a boss who told me it's a lot more important to understand rather than to be understood. So.
Absolutely right. That is so true, to understand. Excellent. Okay, very good. And then did we have any other groups? Was there a group 6 or was there group 6?
There's a group 5 too.
Okay.
Yeah. So our group talked about, being able to ask the right questions and keeping those questions kind of focusing on hope streams, goals, just to keep the conversation moving forward to what they really want, and also to be truthful in responses to. It's not a time to, not give people good, positive feedback, but also to be truthful in the feedback that you're giving as well.
Absolutely. And the other key is when you're sharing it with them, you did this great, you did this great, you did this great, and you're going to be a rock star when we work on these 2 or 3 things. Notice it's an and rather than a but. You did this right, you did this right, but you didn't do this. Notice the difference in there. And if we say and we can really perform in this area, it's still an area of performance, an area of improvement, but it's not followed by a but. So get the buts out of there. All right. Anybody else? Did I get all the groups? Going once, going twice. All right. Excellent. And we're going to go back to, can you, let me see if I can screen share here. I don't know if I can. Do you have control of it now, Sarah Beth?
You should still have it as well.
Let's see. Are you seeing that at all now?
Mm-mm. Michaeline, do you have his PowerPoint you could pull up?
I'll get it here when I get this, and we'll do screen share. And I just got to make sure I get to the right slide.
There we go.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about this concept before we start to wrap up, because this is just a really important key. Why is why bad? And the reason why is bad is if you ask why, you're putting people on the defensive. So why aren't you watching the ball? That speaks to self one. But if you want to, what you do want to ask is, which way is the ball spinning? How high is it this time as it comes across the net? Does it spin faster or slower after it bounces? Notice the difference in that. That's asking about details, and those are open-ended questions with details. It'll be incredibly powerful to do that. But you want to avoid why. Which, what, where, when, how are all fair games. You want to avoid the why. And, this is a great one, is which way is the ball spinning as it comes towards you? How high is it? Those are all great kinds of questions you can ask. So you truly want to do open-ended questions. They're much more effective in generating awareness and responsibility in the process. There's no key. And then I talked about why is why bad. Stick with what questions, tell me more, things like that. But why evokes blame and defensiveness, and that's a bad way to go about it. And this is an important concept here, and I'm going to probably wrap up with this one, even I didn't cover all of the slides. But I love this idea right here. And it basically is a concept of you learning coaching today, but also sharing it with other people when you coach. And of course, then I got away from my slide there. So there we go. But the reason this is important is if you dag nabbit. There we go. But there, you can tell people something, you can show them, or they can be experienced. But what it says is recall after 3 weeks doesn't change a whole lot if you're told, shown, or experienced. But recall after 3 months changes a lot if you're just told, if you're told and shown, or if you're told, shown, and experienced. But one of the keys to this process is, and I love this concept here, is you can have about 90% recall after 3 months if you in fact teach some of these concepts. So what I want you to do, if you want to really learn how to coach more effectively and really have an impact of remembering what you hear today, teach some of these concepts to someone. Go home and Chris can go to her husband and say, hey, I heard a presentation on coaching and these are some of the things that I could share. And this is what I learned. And that would have a huge impact on what your recall is and what your recall will be after 3 months. But there's a number of books I like on coaching as we begin to wrap up here. I love the book Coaching for Performance by John Whitmore. You can buy a used edition. I actually have them. So if I will tell you, the first person who sends me an email and says they subscribed to my podcast, I will actually give you a copy of John Whitmore's book. I bought a bazillion of them for my clients because I was having trouble finding the 4th edition. So I actually contacted the publisher and I bought like 500 of them for my clients. But anyway, it's a great book. So if you send me an email and say, I subscribe to your podcast, Coaching for Potential, I will send you the book free. So you'll get a free copy there. And so what I want to do here is have you take a moment quietly by yourself. What's 1 or 2 or 3 things you learned today that you liked, you want to take back with you? So very good. So group 1, what did you learn today that you liked?
Well, we learned that having a big gulp during this presentation is very important.
I'll drink to that. You just don't know there's vodka in this.
And Rory, you know who that came from. That did not come from me.
I know. It's perfectly okay. It's perfectly okay. Very good.
No, but seriously, the things that we learned were ask open-ended questions, to be told, shown, and experienced. Let's see, what else was it? Be the solution, not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing someone's potential and not their performance.
Excellent. Love it. Excellent. Very good. Group 2, what did you have?
We had, so multiple people liked Coach Like a Mom.
Okay.
So better retention through experience.
Okay.
Once you've learned someone's story, it's hard not to love them. And that goes really for everything that's happening in today's world.
You bet.
Being more deliberate with questioning, not just why.
Yep.
And fatigue makes cowards of us all.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah, I love that from the great Vince Lombardi. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, group 2 or group 3, excuse me. Group 3, anybody there? Okay, we'll go to group 4.
All right, we liked the key takeaway of lead with questions and focusing on the positive.
And I will tell you, there's an excellent book written by Michael Marquardt. He was a professor at Georgetown. He's since retired. I've actually interviewed him for the podcast, and I actually interviewed him for his book, Leading with Questions. And it's a great podcast, and it's just a great concept of not only from coaching, but you can also lead with questions. So thank you for doing that. Anybody else? Other things you learned that you liked on group 5? Going once, going twice.
I think Megan was going to touch on that.
Can we go back to group 3?
Oh, sure. Who was group 3?
We talked about one of the things that we learned was to focus on whoever you're coaching, not on yourself. Also attaching blame. Don't, the asking why is actually putting a guilt trip on somebody or attaching blame to them, and you want to avoid doing that. We also talked about if you learn about somebody's life, you're going to love them. I made the statement that in truth, there are people who I've learned about their life that I don't like. So.
That there's some truth to that, and I want to. If I were there, I would star you up and give you a star for your incredible honesty, Dan. So very. Yeah, I got to say, true. There are some people that told me their story, and I was like, nah, I don't want to live like that. So that's a good. All right, is there a group 5? Anybody from group 5 that can give us their ideas that they had today? And then
I think that must be me. So we had talked a lot about continuing to ask good questions and the hopes, dreams, what they want out of things. And I think that kind of goes along with what people said about like learning people's stories, but you can coach people better the more that you know about them and what they want out of what you're doing. I feel like I'm forgetting. I mentioned that I liked the coaching for potential instead of performance because I think it can be pretty enticing to only coach based off of things that are going well rather than long term. There is potential there for things to go well. So maintaining the coaching position, even if things are not spiked in performance. And then I forgot what Jeffrey said, but those were a couple of the things that we had mentioned.
Okay, very good. And one of the things I didn't mention today, and I want to give you this as a formula, P equals P minus I. You may want to write that down. P equals P minus I, and it means performance equals potential minus interference. And what you want to do in coaching is find out what is that internal interference. And if you can discover that and remove that interference or diminish it, you're going to improve performance. So performance equals potential minus interference. And our goal as a coach is to ask questions and find out what is that interference? Why are they coming into work late? Why were they performing great last year but not this year? Is there something going on? Is there something happening? And I had a client who had an employee and they were coming in late. And what happened is they got a job at a bar. They started taking Ambien at 2 a.m. in the morning and they couldn't wake up at 8 o'clock to get to work. So there's just all kinds of interference and you've got to ask questions to do that. So I love that. So I'm going to just recap what people said. Group 1 said, make sure you get a big gulp, ask open-ended questions. Told, shown, and experienced will help you remember things. Teach it is the best way to do it. Be solution focused, focus on potential and not performance. Coach like a mom, love them when you hear the story. And fatigue makes cowards of us all. And I know I had the rest of them, but I can't find my page. I think I skipped a page in here and I can't find it. So why did I do that? That is the weirdest thing, to not have the follow-up page there to the questions. But anyway, those were some of them. You heard that. I just want to finish with one quick story, and that is, reset to zero. And this is, and is it okay if I just go a second longer, Michaeline, to tell one more story? That'll work. All right. But anyway, it's out of my best book, My Best Boss Ever. So if you're the second person to tell me that you signed up or subscribed to my podcast, I'll send you a copy of my book, My Best Boss Ever. I wrote it about 10 years ago, and this is a story out of it. It's called Reset to Zero. A young lady was walking up to her CEO's office, and the CEO was chewing somebody out. She heard it. The door was cracked a little bit. She starts to walk away, but the CEO finishes that she sees her walking away from her office. She says, come on in. And there was no residue of her anger whatsoever. And so the young lady asked her the question, got the information she needed, and went back to work. But it bothered her for an entire month. how did this CEO maintain that control of that process? How do they do that? And so finally, about a month later, she goes to her and she says, I didn't mean to overhear the conversation, but I heard what was happening before I met you last month. But you were incredibly angry with that person. But when I came in, there was no residue of that at all. And she goes, well, she lives by a philosophy of don't let the frustration impact your judgment. And so she said, the important key is to reset to zero. And she goes, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, raise your hand if you remember the blue screen of death with PowerPoint or with computers way back then. Anybody old enough? Raise your hand, just wave at me. Wave at me. And Jeff says 2 times. Very good. Eric, you don't remember the blue screen of death? Dag nabbit. But anyway,
No, sorry.
You're just too young. You're just too young.
I am.
You're just too young to remember that. But anyway, she'd have the blue screen of death. Her computer would go down. She called IT and she said, what can I do? And they go, everything is lost. And she goes, okay, what do I got to do? She goes, reboot the computer. She goes, what does reboot the computer do? She goes, it resets everything to zero. Computers are just zeros and ones underneath it all. And when you reboot it, it resets everything to zero so it can restart again clean and on a break spot. So when she was working with an employee and she became frustrated, she didn't let that frustration cloud her judgment. She would mentally reset to zero because she had an employee one time when she in fact got angry. She upset the employee very much, and the employee actually got a box, went back to her desk, and resigned immediately, and the CEO could never bring her back. So that moment always had a huge impact on her, and she was always bothered by it. So I want you to make sure you reset to zero, listen to people. Coaching is one of the best keys possible. And so if you send me an email, I will send you a copy of John Whitmore's book, Coaching for Performance. Make sure you send me a physical address because it's a physical book. And then the second person will get a copy of My Best Boss Ever. And with that, I will turn over to Michaeline. Thank you. And we went a little bit long, so I hope we're still friends.
Oh, we are, of course. And we'll have you back again, I'm sure. Thank you, Rory. Everyone say thanks to Rory.
Thanks, Rory.
Thank you all.
Well
have
done.
a great one.
Thanks,
Go
Rory.
coach with heart, okay? Coach with heart.
Absolutely. Hey, I just wanted to give a few updates or a few things that we have coming up here at the Chamber. This Thursday, we have the business after hours at Apex, and it will be from 4:30 to 6 p.m. if you're interested in that. Please sign up online. There is limited space on that, but right now we're still accepting people to come. So if you'd like to do a little networking, join us there. And then we have at the end of the month on the 25th, and we're having a virtual monthly luncheon with other joint area chambers. We're getting together and we're having we're having Governor Parsons speak during the luncheon. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Governor Parson, if you could get those to me or anyone here at the chamber ahead of time, we'll pass those along, and then they're gonna, choose some questions that they're gonna be talking about. They won't be able to answer everybody's question, but I think they're gonna try to answer as many as they can during the session. So join us. I believe it's at noon on the 25th. So we do need you to sign up because it will require a Zoom link on that. So that's what we have coming up. And I appreciate everyone's participation today, and I especially appreciate Rory for coming and doing this for free for the chamber and our members. We appreciate it. So thank you everyone for being here, and have a great day.